Okay, so if I want to move my animation into After Effects, there's a couple different ways I can do it. So I can click on this new composition from footage, or I can just go to File and go to Import, and then go to File. And so if you're done with your animation, if you've like completely done everything, you can go into the File Explorer, and you can actually import your Flash file. And you can say composition, retain layer sizes, blah, 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 import. It's going to import a file. I'm going to say OK here. And now we have this walk cycle composition. And so there we have it. You can see I've got my layers. I've got everything set up. You can see the shading actually doesn't really translate. So what we'd probably want to do is combine those layers into one layer. I'm just going to turn this off for now, and we'll just not have shading for a little bit. I'll play around with that later and figure those things out. We can also turn off our ground. That's easy to do as well. And then we do have this folder where you can see these are actually SWIFTs. So it does actually turn those things into SWIFTs. The only kind of like disadvantage here is if I do go back to animate and make changes, I'll have to import it again, and it may mess up the links between the different files. So I can also import SWIFTs. I'm going to get rid of this composition for a second. I'm going to go to import and go to multiple files. And here's where I would import my SWIFTs folder, and just grab these and click import. And now I have these SWIFTs here. What happened to my... Okay, so now I have these individual SWIFTs, and I can throw those into my composition as well. So let's make a new composition. Well, normally I would just drag them into a new composition from footage. Maybe I can click these together. Yeah, so I'll make a new composition from these SWIFTs and say OK. And so this like basically looks exactly the same, right? For some reason my ground, because the way they're named, the ground is on the top and the shading is on the bottom. But this basically does the exact same thing. Again, the difference is it's much easier to replace those SWIFTs from Animate versus re-importing the Animate file. So again, if you're completely done with your walk cycle animation, you should just import the Flash file because it's faster. If you're still going back and forth, then you're probably going to want to use this process where you publish the SWIFTs so that you can publish them back into the same place. Okay, so let's do a little bit of animation with this now. And we're just going to show a couple different things that we can do before we set up the camera. We're going to do that later. So I have a couple different versions of this. I'm going to rename this composition, and I'm just going to call this walk cycle. And so I'll open this up. And so there's my walk cycle, and it's not very long. It's also not playing for some reason. I might have forgotten to click something. Is the other one playing? Yeah, the other one is playing. Okay, let's delete these and see if we mess something up. Okay, let's try that again. So I go to import multiple files. I have my SWIFTs. Import as footage. Let's create a composition and import. I don't know why it's opening a new window. Okay, something weird. Okay, so We want a single composition. Okay. Huh. So I don't know why the animation isn't playing. Maybe I skipped a step. This is not normally how I do this. Single composition. Okay, I'll have to test this later. I'm not sure why he's not going. Let's open up the... Oops. Okay, I'll have to test this later. He should be playing, but I'm not really sure what happened there. I might have skipped a step. But I'm just going to delete these for now. We'll just use the one that does work. Either one will work the same way. So we have our walk cycle here. This one he's animating. It's going along fine. So we're just going to replace the ground. So I'm just going to hide the ground. And so we need to fix a couple things. One is that the composition is only 1 second long, because that's how long our original animate composition is. And so if I go to the composition and I right click and go to composition settings, I can change the duration. Let's say we want our whole animation to be 5 seconds long. Now we have a longer animation, but the character stops walking. So let's just focus for now. I'm going to unlock on this final colors layer. So you would think that I would be able to drag this out and it would just repeat the animation, but you can see when I try to drag here, it doesn't drag. If I hover over the right side of this layer and try dragging it to make it longer, nothing happens. And so there's a couple steps that I need to do to make this work. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so we can see the menus. So if I right click on this and go to time, I can click on this option to enable time remapping. And that's going to allow me to change the duration of this layer, even though it has like a set number of frames. So I'm going to go to enable time remapping. Now I can change the duration of this animation. But we still have an issue, which is, whoops. Okay, now, oh, I set that somehow. So now we just see that there's one cycle of the walk cycle, and then it just stops. Okay, so we can drag these keyframes out. Why does, okay. So we can drag this keyframe out to here, but all that does is make the walk cycle take longer. So that could be useful, but what we really want is to loop the walk cycle multiple times. And so there's no really like easy built-in way to do this. The way that we have to do this is we go to this like time remap guy, and there should be a little where's the oh, I have to do that maybe. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's a step which I always forget, which is this little pick whip guy. We have to use to allow us to set this property. So we just drag this little pick whip thing over here. That's going to add this expression. Expression is like a little piece of code, essentially. And to get the expression we want, you can actually just type it directly into here. You can type whatever you want in there, and if you know the expressions, it'll do what you tell it to do. But if you don't have all the expressions memorized, what you can do is just click on this little arrow here, and then there's a bunch of different options here. The one that we want to go for is property. I don't know why it's called property, but it's just called property. And we want this one called loop out. So that's just going to keep looping after the end of the keyframe. So we type loop out here, and the type is cycle, so it just keeps going. And then how many keyframes is 0. We just leave that all the same. And so now, oops, we have to get out of the editor. So I'm going to click over here. Now he's going to keep walking, and it's going to keep cycling the animation for as long as the layer is. So I can still make the layer shorter, and it'll turn off at a certain point. But what we want is for this layer to keep going through the whole animation. Okay, so that's the first part of the process. I haven't saved this yet, so I'm going to hit Command S and save, and I'll save this as walk cycle. I'm going to have a lot of files called walk cycle, but that's okay. So then I'm going to collapse this layer, and we're going to add in our background. So one of the reasons I did the background in Photoshop earlier is to show that we have this connection between the different Adobe programs. And the one between Photoshop and After Effects is a little bit better. Instead of exporting everything as JPEGs or PNGs and then importing them as image, I can actually just import the Photoshop file. And then when I make changes in Photoshop, it'll update in After Effects. So that saves me a little bit of workflow time of like exporting these files. So I'm going to import another file. I'm going to go to File, Import, and File. And now I'm going to go find my background.psd. And there's a couple of options here. So I can import as footage or composition. Either one is fine. You might want to do composition if you want to have like a separate composition that has your Photoshop layers. But I don't have that many layers, so I'm just going to go with footage. I'm going to turn off create composition. I'm going to go to import. And then you can either merge your layers, so it'll just be one file. If you just have one image for your background, that's probably the best one you want to do. Or you can choose a layer, and so you can choose, notice that I have the layers with the names are here. So I have the planet, the space, background. I forgot to name my front layers. I'm just going to do merged layers and do it as one thing. But if you want to have separate layers, you can import the different layers, and then they'll update when you update them. So I'm going to put my background down here into my animation. And now I'm going to animate it. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And you can see the whole background there. And I want to be kind of precise, so rather than just like dragging this around, I'm going to go into my transform, and I'm just going to set the position here, so that starting X position is 640. I'm going to set that to 0, or actually I'm going to set it the other way. So let's set it to 1200. Maybe 1280. Yeah, it'll be 1280 because my composition is 1280. And then I'm just going to keyframe that. And let's move the keyframe back to the beginning. I have my playhead over here, but I should have it up here. And then I'm going to move the playhead all the way to the end. And then I'm just going to set this to 0 so it lines up with the end. And now we're going to have our background moving as we walk through the scene. So then you can play around with the timing to get it to match the steps. You can also play around with the timing of the walk cycle. Now that we have the time remapping, I can move these keyframes around. If I want to slow it down or speed it up, you can get different, you can match the timing a little bit better that way. Another thing that we need to do, one of the reasons I kind of made the ground uneven, is we can also animate the position of the character. So we can use that layer and animate the position over time. So that's the last thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to save this and go to here, and I'll drag this down just a little bit and go to my layer. And then I'm just going to zoom in a little bit and make sure that my character lines up with the surface. So I'm going to hit position. I'm going to keyframe the position here. And then as I kind of play along, if I notice that the character kind of dips here, I'm going to want to add a keyframe right here. So I'm just going to click the keyframe button. And then when we dip down to like here, and you can add different, you can add as many keyframes as you want to get a level of sort of consistency. But what I can do is just drag the Y down to match it right there. And then we're going to get sort of a little walk down. And you can also, this one is going to be a smooth animation down, but you might not want to. You might want to add more keyframes and do like hold interpolation, so it like steps down. You can obviously do all the same stuff with keyframes as you would have done before. So he's going to step down, and then at this point, he's obviously got to go up. So you don't have to do this as well. You might have him lower in the frame, and so then it wouldn't really matter what the movement is behind him. But I just wanted to kind of show this as an example of how we can use After Effects to do different things. So maybe I don't want him to go all the way here. So maybe I'd go here and drag him down a little bit, something like that. Again, I can just like add as many keyframes as I want here. That's like a little too smooth looking. So I might want to put like an extra keyframe there and just kind of drag it around. And then of course he goes down again here. But again, this could be useful for a lot of different scenarios, like if you have a spaceship and you want it to be flying around, but it also has like a frame-to-frame animation. And so that looks like our whole thing. So let's zoom out a little bit and see how that looks. I'm going to go to Fit. So that looks pretty decent. And of course, there's a million different little things that I can play around with here, but that's kind of the basic setup that we want to go for. So now we have like a few different layers that we can play with in our animation. So I'm going to stop here. In the next part of in the next block of class, I'm going to go over adding a camera, which adds another kind of like layer of things that we can do with the animation. And then we'll also go over exporting and publishing this version of our walk cycle. Okay.